Hello friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. We're going to be looking at this full moon coming up, and I think you'll find the discussion of interest. There are certainly a lot of outer planet connections, and some of these are with the new planets in the Kuiper Belt that have only recently been named by the IAU. I've been working with these energies. A lot of astrologers are interested in them now. Not a lot of astrologers are working directly with them. I'm starting to work with them, which is very interesting for me. They're very much featured in this full moon that's coming up. So that's something I want to talk about. So let's take a look at this full moon. Let's see what we got. And you should be able to see the chart now. And the full moon is, of course, indicated by this really dramatic opposition of sun and moon across at the 0 point of these mutable signs of Sagittarius and Gemini. And of course, right away, what jumps out at us is that Jupiter is next to this sun degree, very close, really only 2.5 degrees, something like that. And so we have a very Jupiterian full moon in Gemini, sun in Sag. This is an optimistic time. This is an expansive time. This is a time when, we're celebrating the Thanksgiving Day holiday, coincidentally or not coincidentally. Happening just as the sun enters Sagittarius every year, which is the the sign of Jupiter's sign, and Jupiter is all about growth, expansion, optimism, thankfulness, spirituality, belief, faith, and we have a lot of that reflected in this particular American holiday, which I've always found quite fascinating. Then, as the sun enters Capricorn, the next sign over, we enter into our own holiday, not worldwide, but in the Western world, of Christmas, which for some reason or another is based on a very materialistic viewpoint of let's give everybody lots and lots of gifts, which, that Capricorn is very familiar with the material world. So it's interesting how we have the holidays. And right now we do have such an interesting configuration to talk about, because not only is Mercury now retrograde, creeping back towards the sun, they will eventually collide with each other, not literally, of course, but in terms of their longitude. There's a diagonal longitude. And that'll be an interesting point in the retrograde cycle. But as the retrograde cycle began, Mercury was at 13 degrees of Sag, a few degrees over. And of course, here we have Neptune at 13 degrees of Pisces. So this is a very strong Mercury retrograde with Neptune. And not only that, right now, there is another outer planet connection with Mercury, because if we right-click on this planet in the Time Passages software, you can see the parallels. We want to list the parallels that correspond in this natal configuration of the actual day of the full moon, which is the evening of Thursday, which is Thanksgiving Day here in the U.S. And sure enough, we do see that Mercury is parallel to both Saturn and to Pluto. It's also slightly parallel to Makemake, which is the new planet indicated by this glyph. Just to show you, Mercury is at 22.5, Saturn is at 22.7. So they're pretty close. And it does mean that in addition to having that Neptunian flavor of the entire Mercury retrograde period, this particular full moon, which is a lot of strong energy because of the full moon, we do have Mercury also in connection with Saturn. Now, Mercury with Saturn means that we're taking it seriously, that we're doing everything twice, 3 times, 4 times because of the Mercury retrograde as well. So it means that this particular weekend, I believe, will be a stronger sense of the Mercury retrograde, a stronger sense of trying to get things done, and it takes a while to do it, but the effects are long-lasting. So we have that kind of a Mercury retrograde in this full moon, concealed in this full moon, or actually not so deeply concealed. The other thing that's quite fascinating in this chart is that as Venus has been stationing at 25, it's gotten a little bit ahead of where it actually turned around on the 16th last week. And at this point, it's exactly where Haumea, this new planet, which is called Haumea, I can click on it, you see Haumea in Libra, and describes the planet a little bit in the mythology of the Hawaiian creation goddess of Haumea, for which this planet is named. They are so close together in the sky, 26 degrees of Libra in 5 minutes or 8 minutes, and opposite to this very interesting midpoint, which you can't see directly in the chart, but 23, 29, the midpoint is 26. So the midpoint would be about 26 and 18 minutes, something like that, a quarter of a degree different. So we have a very strong, powerful presence because here we have Uranus and Eris conjunct each other, since Uranus has been moving backward into Aries. Conjunct each other in Aries, so we have surprises. We have a revolutionary spirit in the air. We have a sense of everybody's got to stand up and be counted for what they most deeply believe. That's the Eris archetype of a feminine warrior energy. This midpoint, exactly opposite this very close conjunction at the full moon of Venus and Haumea. And what in the heck does that possibly mean? So Haumea, as I've been discovering, both Haumea and Makemake, this is Makemake right here, both Haumea and Makemake are energies that relate to earth issues. They're both creation gods of Polynesian cultures, and Haumea, the creation goddess of Hawaii, is known to be very fertile. She created with her magic all of the flora and fauna on the Hawaiian Islands. She's the mother of Pele, very important in Hawaiian mythology. And I've been discovering that it is representative of a profound connection with nature. I find it over and over again in the charts of people like John Muir, people like Henry David Thoreau, who famously talked about living close to nature way back in the 1800s. So not just those two, obviously, over and over again I find it. I've been doing a lot of research. And so knowing that this is a close connection with nature and with earth issues, with, in many cases, celebrating earth issues, in many cases celebrating the natural world, the beauty of the natural world, feeling a direct connection to spiritual source. It's a very, I call it an earth goddess energy. It's a very spiritual energy. Seeing that with Venus at the new moon, I was talking about, because they were like this for the whole past 2 weeks, as Venus slowly turned around at 25 degrees of Libra. So I've been talking about this energy. What I said about it at the time was, I said, we're going to see a lot of energy for earth issues. We're going to see that become a topic of conversation. And I even remembered that there was an outbreak of Kilauea, the volcano in Hawaii, that took place when there was another prominent, another instance, I think it was in June, of prominent Haumea in the new moon configuration at the time. And I mentioned that looking back on that, there could be another volcanic outbreak. We didn't see that, but what we saw was the outbreak of these terrible wildfires, both in Southern California and in Northern California. Northern California, by far the most destructive wildfire that's been in California, with a history, a large, tremendous history of unfortunate, terrible wildfires. And that has really had the secondary, of course it's a great tragedy, and our hearts go out to the people who have lost their homes, in some cases their loved ones, terrible. I don't want to minimize that whatsoever, but it is interesting to me, looking at these configurations, that it's also brought earth issues to the fore. And of course what we need is greater consciousness about global warming, and about the man-made component of it, and about the time frame getting so short, what can be done. And really it's time for the world to join up and get together, and some nations are part of that Paris effort. And of course the United States notably is not at the moment. But there is going to be a lot of energy in the future, in the next 10 years, I believe, in really looking at that global warming situation, because it's getting really dire. It's getting to be a situation that can't be ignored for much longer. It's been ignored far too long, as I think most people realize. So anyway, when I saw this strong Haumea in the new moon, and now it's in the full moon as well, even stronger in the full moon, but very precise alignments between the midpoint and this close alignment at 26 degrees, I was very aware that it should represent, on a collective level, a stronger understanding of what's going on with the Earth. And I believe that's been the case, even though it's been through great tragedy, that I did not expect that. But I think it's quite fascinating, these new planetary energies coming into existence, letting us know that right now it's important to stand up for what we believe, which is the message of Eris. Very important. And, you know, that's the antidote to hopelessness at this time. I mean, people say, what can you do? Everything's running amok all around us, and it's out of each individual's control. I don't feel like I'm in control whatsoever. Well, you know what you can do. Of course, you can vote. You can run for office. You can be strong and firm without being violent in your belief about what needs to happen. And you can stand your ground, and you can say, this is what it is. I don't care what the rest of you say, what society seems to think. This is the way it is as far as I'm concerned. And that's a great blessing, because by being able to articulate what you most deeply believe, what you really stand for, and by making an action in that, in behalf of that, you know, that's the thing. You can't just sit around and mope about it, or sit around even and complain about it. You actually have to do something positive to try to make your values happen. And if you can do that, boy, you're actually rescued from this sense of helplessness, because you've done what you can do. You've made a stand, you've taken action, whatever you can manage, and so you've done what you can. You know, at least that's a great blessing, a feeling of, at least I've done my part. You know, if everybody would do their part, we would see a change. As we head into 2020 and these massive changes that we're going to see in society at that time, we're seeing a big turnover. And I think the first instance of it has been in the last election, when we did see a lot of women running, which I think is a good thing. We saw a lot of progressive voices for change, you know, to try to see what can be done to solve some of these problems that we have, you know, to actually make an effort to create some change. And the fact that this is all happening in Libra with Venus, and Venus now direct, to me that indicates there is at least a chance for greater diplomacy, greater understanding that we can have for the other side, not to have such divided polarities and such bitter speech and such hate crimes being rampant, but a real attempt to understand the other point of view and to come to some kind of a compromise, agreement, partnership, working together. The sign of relationship, Venus, Libra. This is very important to recognize as a potential for right now. And of course, everything is in the stars. It's only a potential, and we have to do the work. You know, it's not just this is what's going to be fated to happen. It's this is what the possibilities are, and how can you try to align yourself with those possibilities. That's the way astrology works. We also have a very strong Mars here. Mars is to be, Mars rather is completely square with Jupiter, running away. Actually, Mars is going faster than Jupiter. But, you know, this is a strong square, and so there's a lot of energy, a lot of activism, a lot of faith, a lot of belief. There's a danger of maybe going too far in terms of activism. And then we have that reining in factor of Saturn still prominent, still powerful with Pluto. There's a parallel between Saturn and Pluto, and Mercury, retrograde Mercury right now. So that's very interesting. And one last thing I will mention, that Haumea is square to Saturn. So they won't, that's another one that's not a forming square. That's been a square before when Saturn was back at 5 degrees. So this has been kind of a tough time, kind of a time of recognition of the actual limitations of the situation. Maki is another of these Earth energy oriented planets, the two of them that are named. There's only 2 planets named besides Eris and besides Pluto in the Kuiper Belt named as actual planets. And so I think they're very significant. I think they will prove to be more significant as we go on with it, as we learn more about it. And Maki seems to represent a more activist stance, like let's do something about it. It's quite interesting to me that Maki is in partile conjunction with Eris in the chart of Teddy Roosevelt, who very famously set aside lands. He was considered the environmental president, and he started the movement. I mean, there were a couple of national parks that were designated before his reign, before his administration, I should say. Anyway, but he definitely stepped in and was known for setting aside large tracts. Quite a bit of the federal national park lands were set aside during the administration of Teddy Roosevelt back in the early 1900s. So that's mostly what I had to say about this full moon. We'll see if anybody has any questions about it. And I did want to mention these new planets. I think it's quite fascinating. Haumea and Makemake, as well as Eris. People aren't working with them yet, but I think they will be before too long, because they're definitely very powerful factors in charts. And what we have is we have a fairly optimistic possibility here. We have retrograde Mercury, means introspection, means looking within, means trying to solve what's the basis of things, where are we going, why are we going where we're going, and how can we adjust our forward progress, which is the province of Jupiter, to look ahead to see what the future holds, and to try to be proactive, to try to make things happen in a way that is positive rather than lapsing into just giving up. So it's a good time for activism. It's a good time to step up and be counted and start laying the groundwork for 2020 in terms of knowing that that's a big societal shift, and also another election here in the U.S., which is going to be a very important one. So that's pretty much what I had to say, I think, and we'll take it back, I think. Well, I'll keep the chart up and just see if anybody... Leslie, does anybody have any comments or questions at this moment? Nobody's checking in? Okay, well, we're going to make it short and sweet today. I wanted to get that message out about these new planets and about the energy, which, in a full moon, what you have is you have a realization of coming to the flowering of the notions that were originated at the time of the new moon back on November 7th. So, basically, we're coming to a sort of high water mark of the energy, and then we slide back and the energy wanes into the next new moon in early December, when Mercury will actually also start moving in the other direction, straightening out again. So until then, we have a Mercury retrograde time, and we have a thoughtful time, a time perhaps as we celebrate in this country of giving thanks for what we do have, and for the recognition and the understanding that can actually make a difference as we head into the future. So I think that's all for now. Be well, and blessings to you and your family at this time. And our hearts go out to the victims in the California fires as well. So that's it. Have a good couple of weeks. Bye now.